I'm just being a slave to a machine. That's why young people call it the hustle culture, di ba? Parang, you have to appear as busy as possible, naghahabol ka na ganyan. Para yung resume mo maganda, impressive. Pero sabi ko, if you cannot pause and reflect, you're not being productive at all.
AI is very tempting, especially now there's this need for automation. It's a very tempting shortcut for a lot of faculty members who are, overburdened with a lot of requirements. From an ethical standpoint, how should institutions, balance or strike a balance with the use of AI to ease the burden without really compromising the integrity of the standards? To which it was intended in the first place, and
All right.
the human judgment behind them.
Yes, so it's good you ended with human judgment. The whole point is, are we exercising judgment? So when we exercise judgment, our actions are based on principle and are based on evidence and facts. So of course, principles include honesty, reliability, validity, all of these things. Now, when we outsource part of our workflow to a machine, ask ourselves, are we doing this in a way that is exercising our judgment and our accountability? So, for example, you touch on two areas, right? The administrative side and the teaching side. So let's tackle the administrative side first. So we know that schools are under a lot of regulations and a lot of accrediting requirements, which require a lot of documentation. So this is the administrative side. So obviously, if we have tools that can help us automate part of the workflow and these tools are reliable, it's part of good judgment to use them. We use calculators, we use Excel, we use PowerPoint, we use so many tools. But what's important about these tools, whether it's the Excel or calculators, is they are developed for a specific purpose and they're extremely reliable. The developers are very transparent about these tools. For example, if you use a calculator, let's say you're calculating the ratio of students to faculty and you use a calculator. Of course, you know how to divide, right? But why divide manually if you can use a calculator? The thing about a calculator is if you enter two numbers repeatedly, you get exactly the same answer each time. This is what I mean by a highly reliable tool. Now, often people think that generative AI is like a calculator. This is not true. Generative AI is a statistical machine. I have a master's in statistics from UP. When I tell people it's a statistical machine, they find it difficult to wrap their mind around it. But I tell them, suppose you use a calculator and you say the ratio of students to faculty, let's say, is 40 to 1. Now, every time you divide 40 divided by 1, it will always be 40 in a calculator. Now, would you use a calculator if every now and then it says 39 or 41? So this is what we call statistical, variation. Now, statistical tools like generative AI sometimes does this. Sometimes, in fact, it will say something completely out of range, right? We call these hallucinations. But sometimes it will just cause a little bit of variation here and there. So maybe you asked it to summarize a document so that it will suit the requirements of an accrediting body because the accrediting body has a format. Then you just say, okay, summarize this document following the standards of, let's say, this accrediting body. And then it will come out with something that looks right. But the key question is this, is how do you know it is right? You have to really exercise judgment in checking it. This is where the temptation to bypass judgment happens. Because if it looks right, the thinking might be, it must be right. And this is a fallacy. So many fall into this fallacy. It produces what we call AI work slop.
Yes.
When a person who should have done his work outsources it to a machine and did not check and passes it to the next person in the workflow, which could be a dean who also does not check and now passes it to a UN who will check. There you go. So that's the thing. When you use a tool, you have to make sure that it is developed for the specific purpose you're using it for, and it has a very clear declaration that it is reliable and valid for that purpose. You don't just use any tool. Now, You also mentioned about the educational side. Well, this is where it gets more interesting. Students use AI a lot, whether even if they should not, because they think it is a knowledge tool. It is not a knowledge tool, it is a language tool, which is why I think we like it for summarizing reports, etc., or for transcribing meetings, etc., because it is a language tool. But when you're a student, you're in school to learn about competence, meaning how to be really good at something, unaided, because you're going to be participating in meetings where you have to give your opinion on issues. So you cannot constantly be Googling something. You have to have something in your brain, right? But if you keep outsourcing it, this is the problem. Students may not be developing the needed competence, cognitive competence. So the balancing act, maybe to give a summary answer to your very nuanced question, is that people who have duties, so for the professional QA person, his or her duty is to make sure the reports that come out are valid and can hold scrutiny when the accreditors come, because they will ask about these things. So are you sure that your judgment is not being impaired by the tool you're using? Are you willing to lay your professional name on the line? This is going to give you honest to goodness results. For students, the same principle allows. My duty as a student is to demonstrate to my teacher and eventually when I apply for a job that I have learned stuff. My Bachelor of Science has a meaning. And if I'm asked, if I'm assessed, I can answer confidently, accurately, and coherently. I always look for these three things. No hesitation. When I ask you, you answer. And when I listen to your answer, it's accurate. And when I connect parts of your answer to each other, they connect logically, coherent. If you don't meet any of the three, that means you have not really mastered what you're talking about. And now we have a problem because a lot of HR recruiters are saying when they're interviewing students online via Zoom, they can see that the students are using tools where they're being prompted by technology. So it also affects the academic integrity of people, their honesty. So it's bad enough that it's undermining professional judgment. It's also undermining uh, character. No? It's slowly destroying character. So for institutions, they really have to make sure that any use of the tool is supervised by qualified professionals. Think of it like a prescription drug. This is not over the counter. If a QA professional uses it, he has to declare that to his or her boss that you are using it, and then you are double checking everything. Then perhaps it can make the workflow a little bit more efficient so that it's not so overwhelming. But the duty of ensuring that everything is valid still falls on the professional. The same with the students.
Indeed, Prof, it is really something that should be supervised. And I see it sometimes that since our university, where I work for, doesn't have strict policies yet on AI, it's still in the works. Your feedback is really important for us. So we have to take that into consideration while we're like formulating our policies. Now, Prof, I have an additional question for you. The second question would be, because with AI, we're always prompted to be productive. That's the reason why, because, with capitalism, the goalpost keeps moving. So with like hustle culture that we have today, there's always this need to stand out, especially, now AI to some degree is, or to a good degree, it's very useful for a lot of people who just want to type in an email just to have to correct their grammar and stuff. But, a lot of people have been creating content and all those things. How do we, what is a good way for us to what are your thoughts in this, that how do we, it's not like we could stop and then there are people who are still producing something with AI slop. So we, how do we keep up with a moving goalpost?
So again, you asked a very sophisticated question, Hannah. So I'll try to give a sophisticated answer. Uh, well, big picture. The global capitalist system is aimed at only one thing, and that's to extract as much profit from every resource as possible, right? We know that. And the way the capitalist system demonstrate that is through output. Now, output is an interesting indicator of productivity, but we know that it is a highly flawed indicator. You can produce a lot of quality when quantity, but the quality can really, really be bad, right? So I guess it's like fast food. When we have a lot of fast food, we think we have a lot of nutrition, but that's a fallacy. Practically in every part of the world where there is overconsumption of fast food, you have lifestyle diseases like diabetes, atherosclerosis, etc. But all the fast food companies are racking up record profits. So that's the first thing. Let's not equate quantity of output with real development. That link has long been debunked as a valid one. Now, for human beings working in organizations, they can fall into the same fallacy. They can mistake quantity of output with being a good professional. They can equate the speed with which you produce a report with your quality as a professional. These are not the same thing because work slump is precisely output that is generated without being mindful of quality. So the hustle culture is therefore part of our tendency as human beings to be conformist, to go with the flow, to have this fear of missing out. If everybody is putting up so many posts in social media and you can only put out half of that, there must be something wrong with you, right? Well, at the deepest level is that is wrong. More is not better. Better is better. The key is to make things better. If everybody's hustling and you're the one who is more mindful and make sure that your output is highly quality and reflects your individual voice and your expertise, then I think you're the one who will stand out. This fear of missing out thing precisely is manipulating people to go with the flow. So let's be very mindful of it. It is part of the capitalist structure. It is part of our wiring as social beings to go where others are going. But if you think about it, uh, why do we want to be average? Why do we want to be like others, right? It isn't professional excellence about standing out because you're the best you. Uh, when students ask questions during a discussion, they generate it using AI, and I tell them, I talk to you in the corridors. I know your voice. You have a unique, very exciting voice. But when you all ask questions by generating them using AI, you all sound alike. So my question is, why will I hire you? I can just, buy tokens from an AI. But I like to hear your voice because your voice carries with it your history, your educational background, your provincial parents, all of the richness of life because AI is a statistical regression model. And if you remember, guys, your regression statistics, I know you all love statistics, everything goes to the average with regression. Everybody would begin to say the same thing. After writing so much stuff for 40 years, all my students are now saying, we will delve into this. And I say, I've been writing for 40 years. I never once used the word delve. Now all of your papers say you will delve into something. So that means everybody is sounding homogeneous. Because when everybody's hustling, everybody is homogeneous. So if you go to a mall, everybody is rushing, walking. The one that stands out is the one in the middle, standing still and listening to the piano player and enjoying that moment with the piano player, having a conversation. When did you start learning piano, sir? I hope I can be like you, sir. That conversation stands out in the mall where everybody is rushing, 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 rushing. So it's part of how we should be behaving as human beings. In fact, in the US, they now have so-called analog vacations where millennials take a break, no devices, no gadgets, no social media, and for the first time, they say they're living like human beings. And in Europe, many of the schools have gone back to paper and pencil for basic education. No devices. They bring a notebook, they bring a pen, they work things out through their workbook. When the students are interviewed, again, they say exactly the same thing. This is the first time I think I'm really learning something. Because learning is embodied. You have to work it through your brain. If everything is digital, you just bypass the brain. So those are the important things for us to consider when we look at hustling and thinking that we all have to conform. So maybe let me just give a summary statement, Hannah, because there is this fallacy of inevitability. How does this fallacy manifest? People say, well, andyan na yan eh. What can we do? Right? That's a fallacy. When the COVID virus was here, we did not say, andyan na yung COVID eh. We're all gonna die. We didn't do that. Even though the average pharmaceutical drug takes 3 to 5 years to develop, we put our best minds together and we came up with a vaccine in just 7 months. That's what humans can do if they decide this is not a good thing. We have to do something about this. The same is true with AI. It is not inevitable. It is being pushed by 7 major global tech companies because they have all the resources to do it, and everybody's jumping on it because it's the easiest thing to do. It's convenient. The same is with a mall, right? Why will I go to an Escanita side store with the best product when I have the convenience of entering a mall and having the air conditioning without thinking that in the mall, all your options are being conditioned, that these are the best options. That's why when I go to the provinces, I say, I'm so bored. All of the stores here are the same one I have in Metro Manila. Why did I even come here? I don't feel your local culture. And some mall owners are saying, okay, moving forward, we will devote 10 to 15% of our floor area to the local stores. Well, you better do that. Otherwise, everybody will be eating the same thing all over this country, and that would be a cultural scandal. And with AI, this is happening globally. Our culture is underrepresented in the data of AI. We know that because Western data dominates big data. A lot of Filipino culture is not even spoken. It is experienced and nobody writes about it. But if you come here, that's why foreigners say, oh my God, this is like paradise. And I tell them, yes, it is. Although we make it hell, Filipinos make it hell. But foreigners know that there is so much about our culture that is so rich that we'll never see it described in online. So that's the thing. Let's be very careful about the inevitability fallacy. It's being fed by global capitalists so that we all think we have to get on the generative AI bandwagon.
Well, thank you very much for that, Prof. Can I ask the next question? So
You can also follow up if
yeah,
you like.
it's a follow-up also regarding
Mm.
that. So you've mentioned about generative AI and of course AI and its inevitability, quote unquote. So I guess just to make sure that everybody's on the same page, can you help us define what is generative AI? What are the potential dangers of generative AI if there are any? And in terms of like I've been hearing in a lot of innovation conferences I've been in is that Gen AI is the future. Can you help discuss like what are the dangers of this framework if there are? Yeah.
All right. So this is what makes the field of AI so confusing to many. Actually, when people say AI, they're using an umbrella term for what is actually more than 2 dozen technologies. One of my favorite authors, Karen Howe, says, every time you hear the word AI, think of it like transportation. So obviously, when we say transportation, we will not say, oh, is transportation good for us? Or should we take transportation? Or is transportation inevitable? We don't do that because we know that transportation covers everything from bicycle to space shuttles, right? That's all transportation. But the way the companies have framed this is to make it as fuzzy as possible. So that when we say AI, we think we know what we're talking about. AI has been around since the 1950s, and we have so many forms of AI. Expert systems are AI. That means you pose a question, then it goes to a rule-based algorithm that it gives you an answer. When you use your camera and you point it at people, the AI detects faces so that they can be focused, right? Or when you use filters, these are all AI. When you use Google search, as soon as Google search came out, it already used AI. This is to optimize your search. Now, something interesting happened in 2017. Google invented the generative pre-trained transformer architecture. You can look it up. So 2017 was the what you might call the watershed moment. Suddenly, they can make AI that generates, meaning it produces synthetic text that sounds like human beings. That's why it's called generative. Because remember, in search, when you enter Hannah Faith Navarro, it will show up all the websites where literally the name of Hannah Faith Navarro actually appears. It's really there. That's why it's a search engine. So there's nothing generative there. The AI is optimizing the search, but it does not invent a name. Now, when I'm being introduced in conferences, sometimes the moderator will introduce me as having completed my doctorate in Oxford or Cambridge or whatnot. And then I whisper later, actually, my doctorate is in LaSalle, and I've never been to England. May I know why you think I went to Oxford? And they said, oh, I asked ChatGPT. There you go. This is generative. If it is being generated, literally it's being made up at that time you asked for it. It's like hamburger from some have pre-cooked, right? Some will make it as soon as you order it. So this is generative. So generative means you input a prompt, we call that the X in regression, and then through the GPT algorithm, it will slowly generate word by word. It does not generate a whole sentence at the same time. It gets one word and then it puts the new word as part of the input, enters it again, it generates the next word, gets a new word and puts it back as part of the input, and they can have a million word inputs, right? So since it's being generated word for word, that means statistically it can have errors because that's the nature of the thing. Unlike in search, when it really sees Hannah Faith Navarro, it will really say this web page has Hannah Faith Navarro. So my friends who thought that there might be a person on the internet with the name Benito Teehankee who went to Oxford, I challenged them, why don't you Google? And they cannot find a single page where Benito Teehankee and Oxford are mentioned in the same page. But to this day, they're still convinced that there is somebody out there. There must be, right? Because they refuse to understand that generative is statistical. It's like throwing dice. Of course, in the latest incarnation of large language models, which are generative, they now attach a web search. But the generative part is still generative. You're just putting a web search on top of it. And some say, well, that makes it okay already, right? Well, no, not quite. If you were building a condominium and your foundation, instead of just having cement, gravel, and sand, they mix in some parts of wood shavings, etc., because they ran out of sand. That does not make your structure sound. It's still basically unsound, and a good earthquake will make it fall. But some of us say, well, pwede na. That's what I mean. When we use a calculator, we don't say, pwede na, if sometimes your calculator will say 3 plus 3 equals 7. Hindi sasabihin mo, pwede na yun. Hindi, it has to be always 6. We should apply the same rule to certain types of generative AI. It would be solved if, for example, the generative AI developers will say, okay, when you answer a question, you say, okay, there is about 80% probability that this falls within a certain range of correctness. That would be the ethical thing. The problem is a lot of Gen AI does not do this. It declares things in a very confident way. So people, when you sound confident, they think you know something because that's how we're wired as human beings. If you're fast and confident, oh, I think you know something. And these are so fast. Why? Because they run on data centers that are the size of several mega malls, running 24 by 7. If you had data centers that, and they want more. Karen Howe, citing a McKinsey study, said, at the rate of AI expansion, we will need 5 Californias, meaning the total electrical consumption of California times 5 will need to be added to the power grid. Just picture that.
That's a
That's
lot.
how much energy this thing needs. And that's not counting the water and the land that it will eat up. Just so we can all ask ChatGPT, like some of my students do, what will I have for lunch? Oh my God, anak, you even ask ChatGPT, well, sir, he's my companion. Oh my God, I'm praying for you. I tell them, I'm praying for you. A companion is a human friend. Go there, make a friend. Yeah, but humans are not always there for you. and sometimes they contradict you. Well, I tell them, that's life, you know. If you want somebody who says yes to everything you want, go to a machine, and before you know it, you are now wilted as a human being. You're now like a bonsai. You're in that AI-controlled pot, and you're a very small version of yourself. Do you want to be a bonsai or a fully grown tree? That's your choice. If you want to be a fully grown tree, talk to people. They will not always agree with you, and that's what growth means.
Okay. Just a follow-up question. Actually, there's a lot of things to pick from
Yes,
the
yes, please,
response.
please do that, Vince.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I think my first question, so I feel with Gen AI like being everywhere, or at least AI like being used as an umbrella term, we've heard like there's a lot of dangers in it with regards to its ethics, for example, and also the environment side, and we can go through them one by one. Is there like supposed to be like a framework that we could look into in terms of like how AI can be responsibly used or created, or is there no such thing? Yeah.
Well, I use a couple of frameworks, and I'd be happy to share them. Let me do that now. So, for example, on the human side, because that's always where I like to start, let me share this. Okay. So if we look at human beings, we flourish in the world by attending to some things. For example, the first thing we attend to are our material needs. What does that mean? We have to have enough provisions, resources to be able to eat, to protect ourselves from the element, to cover ourselves, to move from point A to point B, to be in touch with people we care about, to preserve our health, etc., and to know how to think and how to read, etc. So this is what I call the material thing. I use here in this framework the picture of a flower, and you can roughly think of the material aspect as like the pistil, the middle of the flower. But I'm sure you agree that a flower is not just the pistil, it has the petals. So to be flourishing, it's not enough that we meet our material needs. As the Bible says, we do not live by bread alone, right? So to really develop, we need to have purpose in life. So is it our purpose in life to just order every day from Lazada, for example, or to watch a Netflix episode? That's hardly purpose. But if you leave it up to AI, it will make you keep buying from Lazada and keep watching every episode. Purpose has to do with what imprint you want to leave in the world. How do you want to be remembered when you're gone? Or how do you make your life worthy by making the world a little better, right? That's purpose. And then, of course, we talk about ethics, knowing what is right and what is wrong, and having the wherewithal to choose the right, especially if it's a very complex decision. So this is another petal. The other petal, which is very important, is of course our bodily integrity, our health. I spoke earlier about how fast food, because it is so widespread, has undermined our health, causing all sorts of diseases. So health is very important. And then how we use our mind, which is why outsourcing thinking to a machine in the end is not a good thing, because the mind develops only by using it. That's fundamental. And then how do we manage our emotions? We know that there is an epidemic of depression all over the world. Why is that? Because people have grown up with so many challenges. They experience cyberbullying. They're hyper stimulated by technology all the time. There's no time for reflection, no time to have quality time with people that nourish them. Instead, they feel, unless they're watching the latest YouTube feed, they're missing out on something. But having temperance in our feelings, developing our confidence, especially confidence, guys. When I talk to students, I want them to say, I want them to believe that, look, your answer may not fit my expectation, or it may not be the same as the textbook, but that is your answer. Share it, and then we'll have a discussion. That's how you develop confidence. Because a lot of them will not even utter a word because it might not be as good as what the AI will produce, right? So they've already outsourced their confidence to the AI, which is too bad. And then, of course, our appreciation of beauty. We all have different tastes, but we normally like music, we like plays, art, etc. Now, if you go to Spotify or YouTube, easily a third of all music is now AI generated. And if we look at images online, a lot of that is artificially made. So what is happening to our ability to artistically appreciate the product of another human being, whether it's a poem, a short story, etc.? And of course, this is a very important petal. how are we building our social relationships with families, with friends, with workmates, with members of our community? Now, if we're always in looking at Facebook, even some of my students, when they step into class, the first thing they do is plop onto their seats and look at their Facebook. I tell them, okay, after prayer, everybody put your devices down, look around for two people you don't usually talk to. Let's all stand up, go to those two people, shake hands, say hello, and keep chatting until you discover at least two things common about the two of you. And so they come back after this exercise. They're so happy because they discover that guy that they never talked to also plays pickleball, or that guy that they never talked to has a friend who is a mutual friend that they like to go, surfing or diving, whatever. So instead of being trapped in these devices, they realize, oh my God, every time they see people, it's a world of real connections out there. These are not digital connections. These are pure analog connections that really enrich your life. And the important thing is they're free. No big tech companies making money out of you. And I say, see, a lot of life is really high quality and free. They're just there waiting for you to pick on them. So this is one framework. And you can see that all of the red stuff I put here are ways that bad use of AI can undermine your petals. So, for example, when jobs are eliminated because companies think everything can be done by AI, this means that everything that humans earn from will disappear, right? There's loss of meaningful work, loss of income, etc. And and when we're all being managed by AI, because more and more algorithmic management is being practiced now. What do we mean? For example, if you're a Grab driver, the way you're being assigned, hailing requests, or if you're a food panda delivery guy, these are all AI administered. So for example, if I'm a food panda delivery person, the AI remembers that I tend to deliver on the average 15 minutes if it's Quezon City, and this guy tends to average uh, 16 minutes in the same place. The tendency is the algorithm will give it to the guy who delivers in 15 minutes. So this judgment is not being made by a human being like a dispatcher in the old days. It's being made by an algorithm. But if you're the second guy, you're 1 minute slower because you're more careful around the corners. Or if there are old people crossing a pedestrian, you slow down. The AI doesn't pick that up. The AI just picks up that you're slower. So this is what's happening. If you observe the way motorcycles are driving now, they're becoming more unpredictable than ever because they're all trying to beat a quantitative target without knowing that these are all being algorithmically imposed on them. So this is what we mean by social extraction. Human beings are being squeezed so that they can produce more for less until you know that your rate is actually going down. So for example, if a panda guy used to get X pesos for 10 deliveries, he will now get X minus 5 for double the number of deliveries. And then it will just keep going down because the algorithm will just try to squeeze more and more and more and more and more out of you because it doesn't consider your heart rate. It doesn't consider whether you're looking at the safety of people. It doesn't consider that you're being careful about your driving because you have a dependent wife and 3 kids, right? All it's looking at is can you deliver, etc., etc. So with this framework, you can now look at how, in many other ways, AI affects humans. I'll spend a little bit on this side, the cognitive, now because this is very dear to my heart because I'm a teacher. If people are always outsourcing their thinking and their information to machines, they now begin to believe in this information more and more as if it were true. They cannot question assumptions anymore. If many people say the same thing, they say, oh, this must be true because many people believe this. We know that's argumentum ad populum, right? That's one of the most famous fallacy, not because people believe in it, it's true. And then, of course, the worst news, we call it dependence and addiction. Akika is AI-induced cognitive atrophy. So AI chatbot-induced cognitive atrophy. You can look this up. There's some emerging research on this, that if you keep outsourcing your thinking, then it will lead to that part of your brain slowly getting disconnected. The neurons become disconnected. Of course, the attention span issue has been around since maybe 2010, since social media became very popular, but this has been now aggravated by AI use. The other framework, just for the sake of completeness, um, is this one. This is from the European Union AI Act, which, by the way, went into full force yesterday. So if you're looking at the pipeline of how AI is produced, from the way data is acquired and prepared, and then how the mathematical model is calculated, we call this the deep neural network, and then how companies decide to deploy it to users, this is how the picture looks like. Uh, Referred to here are specific provisions of the EU AI Act. So Article 1113 refers to transparency and documentation. For example, a lot of companies are now processing job applicants using AI as a first line of filtering. So if I'm company A, I get 1,000 applicants, that's 1,000 resumes, right? So what do? I put all the 1,000 resumes into AI where I put in initial screening. So let's say I'm looking for certain qualifications, certain abilities, etc., etc. So the AI will now reduce the 1,000 to just maybe 50 for call-ins for interviews, right? Now the question is this: how did the company decide that that AI is a valid and reliable way to cut down 1,000 to 50? So was it fair? Was the modeling fair? For example, if I'm a woman or if I'm a member of an indigenous people's group, do I get a fair chance? Or will the AI just use the usual markers? Do they graduate from the top schools, or do they say fancy sounding things like I was a convener of a committee to advance and so on and so forth? So exactly how is the AI behaving? So this is what the EU AI Act says. Open that model. We want to see how is it working. This is the challenge. If some companies are not willing to be transparent, the European Union will levy extremely high fines. The fines for this law can be as high as, if I'm not mistaken, 5% of revenue. That's how serious the European Union is about this. You have no business cutting out applicants just because of words that appear in a resume, especially if humans are not looking at the resume. Nobody even looked at it. You just let a machine look at it. Of course, some companies are already doing this without admitting it. But I think we all have to be very mindful that in the entire pipeline, so many opportunities for unfairness and exploitation and discrimination can happen. That's why the goal of governance should be to expose the whole pipeline so that everything can be inspected, inspected by a third-party assessor. It could be a CSO or a government agency. In the EU, 27 countries already have an AI authority. This is similar to the Data Privacy Office. You remember when Europe rolled out the General Data Privacy Rights Act, right? All countries around the world followed. That's why in Philippine law, we now have a data privacy law. So I will not be surprised if within the next 2 to 3 years, every organization that is large enough will have an AI officer. And the AI officer's goal is to make sure that before we acquire AI, deploy AI, we have to check the pipeline. We have to check the reputation and the track record of the developer. Are they in fact making sure that the data they're getting is correct, representative, without bias, or are they just getting as much data as they can to feed their AI, often from illegal or copyright infringing sources, just so they can sell it to us? Who knows, right? That's why companies have to come clean and really tell us what's going on. So these are two very important frameworks. The AI pipeline framework, where you can see a lot of the possible harms here that I've listed down, so our audience can just take a picture. And the other one, which is the human development framework. I hope that helps.
It actually does, Prof. Ben. There's really a lot of things to pick on when it comes to AI, like from the policy side to how it affects us in the social dynamic and landscape. So I guess I guess I'll pick one first from all of the things you've shared from us, Prof. I think one of the concerns we've shared, I think before this meeting, Hannah and I were talking how AI is actually very gendered, in terms of how it's working, and there's a lot of instances we've seen from the internet, like from Reddit or from or Twitter, for example, where we've noticed how a lot of the language used, as you mentioned, is very gendered and how there are implicit biases included in AI. Can you discuss more further on this, if ever, Prof?
Yes. Well, as we saw in the pipeline, to build AI, especially, I should be more specific, to build generative AI, you need huge amounts of data. And so where do you usually acquire such data? From the internet. And if you run out of internet data, then you pick on what people are saying. So some companies will use, for example, like Alexa or your phone and listen in because they can get all of this data, right? Or some will leave recorders in public spaces and absorb all of the language being said by people. Now, let's face it, human beings are gendered. We are. So, why should it be a surprise to us that AI is gendered when it gets data from human beings? But the difference between human beings and machines is you can hold a person accountable. Okay, when a person keeps saying he, somebody can say, a woman can say, sir, please notice more than half of us here are women. See? So you can call out a human being. The thing with machines is they're so fast. As we said, if you put in 1,000 resumes and it gives you 50, you will never know that most of the 50 are men because of certain bias terms in certain gendered terms in the resumes. So in summary, gendering cannot be avoided because gendering is socially embedded. It is what humans do. We have frameworks in our minds, right? We grew up with a mother and a father. We grew up reading certain things, watching certain movies. So these things become conditioned in our mind. But in different societies, they begin to realize, oh, that's not fair. Let's be fair, and so on and so forth. For example, for the longest time in history, and this is still true in some countries, young women were not encouraged to go to school. Because in many societies, men prefer very young wives, 12-year-olds, 14-year-olds, and that's part of their social tradition. But some societies sort of reflected on this and say, well, if a woman gets married so early, you're chopping off all of her options. She becomes dependent on a man. And when you become dependent on another human being, this opens up avenues for abuse, right? So because of this social dynamics, some societies said, okay, you shouldn't get married too early. If you do, your parents should agree. And more importantly, we prefer that you get an education first. Then you realize you're making a rational choice. Should I go with this woman or this man rather? Or is it because I feel I'm trapped by this situation? So that's why laws evolve. And laws are part of a social tradition. It's not as if they're written in stone. They can change, right? So, for example, we've seen that in the US, Roe v. Wade was reversed, and now some states have to enforce abortion laws at a state level. So, nothing is carved in stone. This is subject to social contestation, social dialogue, social debate. The problem with AI is who is it debating with? You don't know. You don't know because the companies will not even reveal where they got the data. And this is fundamental. If a person applies for a job, the first thing you ask is, where did you study? Where did you grow up? So what did you do in school, right? But this AI, when you look at the model cards, the system cards, for example, OpenAI is a good example. You can just go to the GPT 5.6, the latest one, and look at the model card. The model card is like the leaflet you have in a piece of medicine. If you buy prescription medicine, there's a leaflet, right? So you open it, it says what the active chemicals are, where you can use that medicine, and where you should not use it. The same is true with model cards. So if you look at GPT 5.6, I believe, the model card, it says data came from diverse sources. What does that say? What does diverse sources mean? let's face it, guys, the original GPTs were trained, a lot of the data came from Reddit, and a lot of the data came from pirated PDFs. Now, think about it. If you were developing a high quality AI, would Reddit be your first go-to for quality data? OMG, I don't think so. But this is now embedded with all the wisdom in Reddit. I'm using that with a scare of quotes, of course. I remember one person was asking Bard, the predecessor of Gemini, oh, when I make pizza, my cheese always falls over. So the guy asked Bard, and Bard said, well, that's easy. You use white glue. To make sure that your cheese doesn't fall, you use white glue, Elmer's glue. And then they were wondering, oh my God, why will AI do this? Then they did some research. 12 years ago, somebody made a joke in Reddit about white glue as like cheese for pizza, right? But the early AI had no sense of contextual humor. It takes things literally. Of course, in time it learns, right? Because people complains about it. Everybody makes a joke out of it on the internet. So in the next version, they scrape the internet again, and all of that quote unquote human learning is now in the next generation. But you can see that if you have a machine that does not discern, but just keep scraping data, scrape, 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 it's no wonder there's so much nonsense coming out of it, because humans are perfectly capable of producing nonsense. That's why we have layers and layers of vetting for knowledge. You have to use knowledge that is vetted. Otherwise, it is really very dangerous to think that they are knowledge machines rather than what they really are. They are synthetic language generation machines.
Indeed, there is a lot to take in from what you've been saying during this podcast, Prof. And you know, indeed, it's like a black box of sort that many of us are. It's unknown to us. Like that's especially it's very technocratic, the nature of understanding this. So, how do you suggest that we democratize the thing about AI, our problems about AI, because it requires lobbying, because you mentioned how laws are made and how the society plays. So how do we lobby when the billionaires are lobbying harder?
Okay, so you mentioned keywords. Let's start with the keyword democratize. And this is where the power really lies, Hannah. First, let me say the word democratize has been abused a great deal. Many people who advocate for widespread AI use, they say, well, at least now, knowledge and technology has been democratized. What they mean is anyone, even your magtataho, can use ChatGPT. And for that they call democratization. But this is a bastardization of the term democratization. Let's reflect for a bit. Democratization means you have a say in things that affect you. Did the magtataho have a say when the AI told him that you're using too much arnibal, you should use this, you should use that? Oh, this is wonderful. Now every taho in the whole world will taste alike, because the judgment of the taho maker is completely removed from the equation, right? In other words, how do you make ordinary taho? That's what they will get. So that is not what we mean by democratization. What we mean is closer to what you mean. How do we amplify our voice so that those who make policy that enables companies and other users to expose us to AI can be held to account? This is the thing about democratization. Now, sadly, Hannah, Vince, this hits into one of our core weaknesses as a society. Now, our constitution says we are a democratic republic. Sovereignty resides in the people. All government authority emanates from the people, and so on and so forth. That's what the constitution says. But if you ask a typical Filipino if he thinks he has a voice in changing policy in this country, he shakes his head. And I say, that is the problem. The average Filipino will not attend a barangay forum, a public forum for a law. They would rather bash people in social media rather than attend the public forum. And I say to them, when you bash people in social media, you're just making Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook or Meta richer. You're not influencing policy. You go to that forum and you raise your hand and say, look, if you open that data center here, we are very concerned about the noise pollution, whether we will have clean water, etc., etc., etc. Don't just join all of this pseudo expertise in social media. That's not where democratization works. Democratization works in face-to-face dialogue, discussions, filing petition papers, writing your mayor, writing your congressman. You know, I always assign my students to write their congressman, and they hate this assignment, you know? Why? Because they think, one, it will not make a difference. Second, the addressee will not even read it. Third, they might be targeted. And I say, see, that's why we will never be a true Republican democracy, because you guys, you work so hard, you look at your payslip, they take so much from you as taxes, and then you do not hold them accountable. Think about it, every congressional hearing costs 1 million pesos to run. So 25 million pesos a day. That's from your taxes. You mean to say you will not even write these people and say, sir, on a House Bill XYZ, I believe you should consider this. That's just one paragraph. Why don't you write? And then if you think he doesn't listen, go to his office and say, sir, I sent a letter. I wanted to make sure you received it. May I know what you think about it? But then again, our Filipinos will say, oh, that's too much bother. I'd rather go to the mall or drink my latte in Starbucks. But this is the whole point. We're being numb. We're being numbed in our senses and our civic engagement by all of this consumption. The way to control a people is to make them believe they're happy if they're consuming. As long as they can order in Lazada or Starbucks, oh, life is better because I can order. That's not true. Life becomes better because we all actively make it better by having high quality conversations, such as hopefully what we're having now. But more so when a bill is about to, that's why in Congress there are 3 readings of the bill, not just one. You get 3 chances. And yet most Filipinos will not even participate in any of those readings. And that's 3 readings before the plenary approval. There's further debate in plenary. That's how a bill gets formed. So we need to be patient. We need to be there for the long run because we know, as you said, the corporate lobbies will be there. But you know, that's part of engagement. When you see them in a room, oh, there you go. There's from company A, there's from company B. But I'm citizen Hannah Faith Navarro. I'm a citizen, I'm a proud citizen of a republic, and I know I can speak up here. I may be just one voice against 8 corporate teams, but my voice will be put on the record. So when this bill is passed, your conscience is clear. I put on the record my objection to that bill, and they still passed it. So in the next election, the congressman who voted against your will, you now tell him, Kong, I advise you not to vote for that bill, and you did not say a word. I will tell everybody that you did not say a word. I will not vote for you. My friends will not vote for you. Now, if young people use this power, remember, you dominate, right? Millennials, Gen Z, and soon Gen Alpha, you are the dominant sector of the economy. No politician will win without getting your vote. You have to use your power because you have the social media networks, etc. When I was young, we used to petition just using mimeographic machines, and we would stand in a corner and give out handbills. Kayo nga, dami-dami yung social network eh. Manginginig yung mga politicians sa inyo. They'll say, oh my God, these guys are speaking up on data centers. So they'll talk to their chief of staff and say, okay, how do we engage this vote? Because they're speaking, oh, you see that girl, Hannah Faith Navarro, this is what she's saying. This is her data source. So we better engage that. Or if they're not ethical, they will release false information countering your information. Now you have to be alert because you'll say, oh, that's false. There's no source for that. Then you have to be patient. Everybody has to go on board here. Because remember, AI can generate so many false reports. Every time you say something, it will generate 100 false reports from so many fictitious scientists and swamp the entire internet. Now, since people cannot think anymore, they will just say, oh, Hannah is just one, and there are 99 people saying this. Oh, I don't think Hannah's right. Now, this is the problem. This is what we're dealing with as educators. We're telling people, know mega mall-sized data center can compete with your brain. You have more parameters in your brain than that machine. But you have to use your brain. If you don't use your brain, oh my God, this AI will take over because we have a God-given brain that is just using 30 watts of energy, imagine, and 1,200 calories a day, which is more powerful than the whole AI of, we don't have as much memory and we don't have as much speed. But in terms of processing power, the human brain is unmatched because we capture nuances, context, non-verbal reactions, all of this. It will, this is something we should be using. So there you go, Hannah. Good luck in your democratic endeavor. Don't bow to a machine, Hannah. You are a citizen in a republican democracy.
Prof, I'd just like to add to that because I used to work for a local government unit and here in Palawan, and there's this thing that is quite underutilized where there are like local special bodies. And when there are local special bodies, like for example, a provincial development council, they usually have private sector representatives. But the thing about it is that a lot of private sector people are not participating because they have to be a collective first. Like you have to have an organization or a council of your own or something like that. So, and when like, because I used to teach also, when I try to teach my students, you should join your municipal development council by being a registered organization. Oh, I don't want to be a collective with people. I just like being an introvert and posting on social media. And that's also a thing that, I think that a lot of young people have been isolated because of, the use of social media. They're just relying on algorithms these days.
You are so right. They're not organizing as much as they used to before. Organizing is key. In fact, that's my answer to my students who say, "Sir, I don't want to speak up because I'll be targeted." So I say, talk to your classmate and submit the petition as a group. That's organizing. And it's so easy now. You just create a Viber group and just say, opt in. You can do that in an hour. So that when the mayor receives the letter, he'll not single you out because all of you are signed there, right? I mean, for all, you just put the bullet points and have AI write the petition. I don't care as long as the bullet points and the facts are correct. What's more important is are the other 40 people there willing to sign? That's what the democratization means. Of course, you shouldn't force them to sign. What this means is that if you're asked, you say, we believe in the principles of this petition, and we would welcome a chance to dialogue with the mayor on this so that he understands what we need. So getting organized is key. And you cannot organize meaningfully if you're just in a talking to your phone. You have to interact with these people face to face and then use the phone now to multiply your reach. But you still spoke to them first.
Okay. So just another question, Prof. So I think one of the things that you've mentioned earlier was disinformation. So I think one of the things that we're noticing right now is how AI has made it so much easier to create false information or disinformation in this case, or in this case, deepfake. Like right now, it's making it even more difficult to differentiate what is real from what is real or real. So it's like what is fake from what is facts. And I think that has been weaponized right now in democratic institutions such as from the government and all of that. With regard to that, what kind of policies should we introduce, or what are suggestions that we can do moving forward to combat this landscape or this dystopia that we have right now when it comes to disinformation through AI?
All right. Uh, well, I wish there were such a policy. We have to remember a policy is made by humans in a social context, and typically we're referring to politicians, right? Now, politicians are humans. They're subject to temptation. They're subject to, well, let's call a spade a spade. They're subject to corruption. So, especially if citizen engagement is very weak in the policy making process, most of the time the policies that emerge are actually skewed towards those in power. This is a challenge. Now, I say this only because I am not that hopeful that a policy alone is a solution. It always starts from thinking how people think. So if there is at all to be a policy, I would venture that the first policy should be massive education on the nature and limitations of generative AI. This should be required for all. And by this, I'm not talking about what I usually see, which is a lot of training on how to use AI. I tell them, why do you start with how to use it? First, you have to tell them, do you know how this works?
Agree, Prof.
That's
Agree.
because if you keep giving training on how to use it, you are just multiplying the spread of misuse. First, what is this? What is it not? And then if you use this, what is happening to you? Now, of course, we know how difficult that is because I keep citing the example of fast food, right? We know we all got busy, parents started working, nobody has time to really cook nutritious meals anymore. So the whole government was just quiet as the TikTok bomb of fast food abuse just exploded. You know, in some countries, you cannot target fast food ads at young people. But in the Philippines, by the time you're 4 years old, you would have seen more than 10,000 Chicken Joy ads, you know. Your idea of a meal is Chicken Joy. So if you go to a mall, you're dragging your parents to bring you to Chicken Joy. So by that time, your preference for fried food is pretty much set for life, you know. But then government will now say, oh my God, we're seeing the social cost of all of this mantika diet. And now they're pushing back and saying, okay, you have to declare calories in food, you have to label properly, you're nudging the fast foods, mag-offer naman kayo ng salads, mahiya naman kayo, di ba? So some are responding, some are not. In the US, they organized and they sue McDonald's, and McDonald's has had to pay hundreds of millions of dollars over obesity suits. Now, I cannot imagine that happening in the Philippines because people don't organize. You know, at least in the schools, the parents' associations drew the line. You know, you cannot just give all of these sodas, etc., etc. But to do that in a global scale, that's so difficult. So that's the first thing. You have to first educate people. Without education, policy doesn't work. A clear example is driving. We put pedestrian lanes, we put stoplights, we put uh, enforcers, and yet Filipinos are some of the worst drivers left on their own. But you have everything. You have a stoplight, you even have no contact apprehension CCTVs. Because the driver was given a license without being educated. In the US, if you apply for a license, on the average, you fail 3 to 5 times. You go to the DMV. May bumabagsak ba ng driver's license sa Pilipinas? I challenge you to show me even one. That's why when you're driving in EDSA and somebody cuts you without even signaling, you wonder, why does this guy have a license? And then you see somebody actually shooting somebody and killing him while they're driving at 80 kilometers per hour. And you say, is this a James Bond movie or is this the Philippines? Oh, yeah, I'm in the Philippines, right? So you begin to wonder why there are laws on what driving safety is, but licenses are given to people who clearly have no concern for safety while driving. Because regulation was done before education. You always have to start with education, a massive public information campaign. That should be a policy. Otherwise, when the laws enter into effect, the first thing that people will ask is, how do I go around the law? Or how do I influence the enforcer so that he will not throw the book at me? See? That's why in other countries like Taiwan, Hong Kong, Singapore, they pay their government regulators high so that you cannot bribe them. Because the mere hint that you're bribing them gets you in jail. Here, you keep introducing new regulations. The key is the enforcer. Can the enforcer enforce the law? If he's underpaid, he's easily bribed. No way. You're just putting more and more layers of regulation on a situation that is essentially misunderstood. So the key is understanding. Now, if you put that side by side, so you have the massive education, then you now have a regulatory authority. For example, in the 20th Congress, Senator Pia Cayetano filed the AI Development Authority bill, right? In the 19th Congress, there were nearly 10 bills filed. But of course, you know what happened in the 19th Congress. We all got distracted by all of the Shiminit situation. Now, in the 20th Congress, we're at it again. There are more than 24 AI bills filed now Will a single one be passed? You tell me. I don't know, because all our energy is going to be into this impeachment until December and all the preparations for the elections next year. So, but the key is this. In the meantime, while the what I call the teleseria politics of our country plays out, we are the serious ones who are trying to really make sure that AI is governed at whatever level is possible, at the level of the school. So Hannah, I would suggest, you already suggest to your school that you have an AI governance policy. You have to tell everybody not a single move on AI should be done until we can make sure that we have a well thought out AI governance policy. Otherwise, it's like you're in a house, your parents, you have children, and you allowed a stranger into your house without calling all the children together. Hey, don't let strangers into the house. Oh, sorry, mom, you told me too late. A stranger is already sleeping in my room. Oh, he's already getting food in your refrigerator. Oh, where were the parents? The parents were sleeping. There's no policy, right? So that's neglect on the part of parents. I think it's neglect on the part of organizations if AI is allowed to move freely in that organization without a policy. There should be a covering AI governance policy. And that's fairly easy to develop because you have a lot of benchmarks online. The difficult part is having the series of forums where you will debate it. And people want to avoid debate, because Filipinos, unfortunately, we can get nasty in debates. We're very nice people one-on-one, but you put us in the middle of a contentious debate, or worse, in social media. We're among the most toxic in the world. Na may personal, di ba? Hindi yung, okay, what is the issue? What do you think of the issue? Instead, you will say, oh, you have the nerve to say that when you don't even know what you're talking about. OMG. So people start tuning out because we don't like watching conflict, right? Except in teleserye, pag nagsasampalan yung mga bida, yung kontrabida. But what we need is a reasoned, democratic discussion so that we're covered by an AI governance policy. Now, once those policies and education is in place, slowly people are now capacitated to fight disinformation. Because disinformation is really sidestepping your critical thinking by convincing you that this is what is happening. As early as the 2016 elections, you remember, Cambridge Analytica was used to target political entities, and now it's going to be done 1 million X. If Hannah here is posting in her Insta or in her Facebook that she likes cats, OMG, the AI will pick that up, find out who your preferred candidate is, and create thousands of videos that says your favorite candidate hates cats. And you will be targeted by that every day, every second. Now, fortunately for Hannah, she's a critical thinker, and she will realize right away, oh, why am I being flooded by this cat-hating videos tied to my favorite candidate? There must be something going on, right? Then you have to ask, oh, a few checks here and there, you realize the social media accounts were just made 1 month ago, no history. You know you're being trolled by AI, right? But the average Filipino will not even check. Because in 2016, trolling was being done by humans, of course. You have entire countries in Eastern Europe. The main industry is trolling. If you go to a house, they have 10 members in the family. All of them are trollers, professional trollers. Now they're all losing jobs because one AI can make is equivalent to one troll farm. It's like you have 100 Pogo employees who's all doing the same thing. Kaya-kaya na ng AI yan eh. So medyo babagsak ang mga economies ng mga troll centers natin, no? But this means that the ability to resist what appears, yung sinabi mo nga, Vince, na the real is never how it appears. That's the first thing. If we ever believe that to see is to believe, we need to throw that out already. That is no longer true. What you see, think of it as the tip of a very huge iceberg. You're seeing that tip of the iceberg. So the critical thinker will right away say, okay, how do I go dive? Like Olivia Dean, how do you dive and you go under? That's when you realize, oh my God, there is so much under the tip. But some people say, oh, I've seen thousands of tips. Okay, you can actually see a million tips of icebergs and know nothing about icebergs because icebergs are not the tips. Less than 10% of an iceberg is a tip. we need to really literally delve. That's why when my students like to put delve in their papers, I say, okay, let's delve, let's have coffee, I'll delve with you. To delve means to deep dive into something, right? They cannot delve. The first question is just superficial and they cannot answer. You cannot delve. You are the best example of superficial thinking, but thinking you can delve. So this is how this information works. It creates what I call the Dunning-Kruger effect. The Dunning-Kruger effect is you're confident that you know something when actually you know nothing. But in the old days, this was rare and far between. Because of AI now, we have a global epidemic of decay. And the thing with decay is if you call it out, people get upset. Because you are convinced that you know so much. So since we're Filipinos, we don't want to upset people. We just say, oh, that's interesting. I want to know more. Can you tell me what your source is? There, right? Meaning, you just want to know, did you actually dive under the water or just believed in the tip? But you don't want to tell him that because he gets upset. And then when he looks at you and say, "No, doesn't everybody know that?" Oh, you know he doesn't have a source. So right away, you know that his belief is probably not informed. Ganun lang, para hindi ma-offend. Ako kasi, professor ako, I right away say, how do you know that's true? And people get offended. For the rest of us, you just say, oh, that's interesting. Share naman your source, di ba? I wanna know more. Yeah, para friendly tayo, di ba? Oh, how do you know candidate X hate cats? Di ba? It's all over the web. Nakita mo ba yung video? Binabato niya yung pusa? The shame of that woman. Ganyan pa yan, no? O sige, padala mo naman sa akin. O, there you do your own forensic analysis. That's when you realize, our God-given brain is so powerful. We just have to take some time to use it. So there is no shortcut to that huge problem you mentioned, Vince. You'll have to be education, not just in schools, but even parents have to tell their children, guys, if you see anything online, assume it's not true. Let's check it first. Let's work together. And then the policies create an authority, like the regulatory authority, uh, like AI quality authority, just like in the EU or something similar. Uh, Congressman Javi Benitez is the leading congressman on AI regulation. Follow his work. Uh, but some say he's moving towards overregulation. You can download the bill. But my thinking is this. Practically every technology, everything we use on a day-to-day basis is regulated. The electricity we use, the water, we go to a restaurant, the food, the airline, everything is regulated. Why would generative AI deserve not to be regulated? Why? Can you explain that to me? And then they tell me, well, because if we regulate it, we're blocking innovation. What? Did that happen with cars when they regulated the brakes of cars? Did we suddenly lose cars? In fact, when they regulated the brakes of cars, the number of car models multiplied because people now thought, oh, cars are safe, I can buy them. When they instituted safety belts, the number of models again multiplied. Why? Because fewer were dying. See? So the narrative, the same as the narrative on inevitability, that regulating something will kill innovation is fallacious. It's not true. Everything we experience in life, from electricity to food to hotels, they cannot just innovate and say, pay us because we have an innovative hotel, because we have this electric massage bed, and then you try it and then you're electrocuted in your own bed in a five-star hotel, and then the hotel will say, well, it was an innovation. You can't do that. But we allow this for this particular technology because we are all subject to decay. We all have this collective delusion that if we don't FOMO with this thing, we are left behind. And I always ask, wait, left behind how? Where's the race? Where are you going? I'm going this way. I'm going to a place where my life is better, my loved ones are safe, and my country is better developed. That's where I'm going. Where are you going? Oh, that place where more of our people are exploited for the data we produce and we don't get paid. Oh, that place where more and more of our workers lose their jobs, or the few who have jobs are managed by algorithms. Oh, that place. Yeah, I'm not in a rush to go there. I'm just not. Because more than half of Filipinos say they are poor. And our constitution is clear. Our vision is a rising standard of living and quality life for all. It's very clear in the constitution. Are we there yet? We're nowhere near that. That's where we should be racing towards, right? Instead of creating more and more billionaires. In 2000, to give you an idea, guys, we had 3 billionaires in Forbes magazine. These are dollar billionaires. So go figure, you multiply with the pesos, right? Now we have 20 billionaires on Forbes magazine. But we're still as poor. So if you're going to create billionaires, my formula is this. For every billionaire, the poverty rate should go down 1 percentage point. Which means if we now have 20 billionaires, our poverty should be zero, right? Well, officially it's still 18, and that's officially. I think it's 50% unofficially. I mean, if we know, because remember, the way the government defines poverty is if a family of five earns at least 15,000 a month, they're not poor. That's why I would challenge anyone, oh, I'll give you 15,000, abunuhan ko na. You have a family of five, right? Buhayin mo nga. Oh. I would put NCR family living wage easily at 40 to 50 a month take home, and that's barely having a decent existence. But to say it's 15, oh my God. And then you report that the poverty rate is about 18 to 20%, but that's assuming the 15,000 a month. So if we really use 40 to 50,000 a month take home for NCR, our poverty rate will be at least 50 to 60%. And now with inflation, it's even worse. And now my friends, even my son, and I could say this, he works for a BPO servicing a New Zealand client. Their entire line of business was closed down because of AI. And this is what's going to happen. Unless we truly, in the sense of what you said, Hannah, truly democratize this technology, which means those who are impacted must have a voice. It's as simple as that. Not just in the elections, by the way, day to day. Because elections is too few and far between, and it becomes all crazy because it becomes all entertainment and show, right? Day-to-day citizenship and democracy is a day-to-day thing. Writing your mayor every day, joining a council discussion day-to-day, that's what we mean. And it starts by making sure our students know their duty. Students have to be trained to be engaged as civic members of society. Going to a mall is not a civic duty. Your civic duty is to find out what your local government is up to. And tell them, sir, bakit po bumabaha pa sa atin? Pwede po malaman? Ganon. Sir, di ba may ordinance po na dapat hindi nagbebenta ng mga alcoholic drinks near schools? Bakit po lasing lahat ng kaklase ko po, sir? Pwede po magtanong? Ganon. Ha? Okay ba yun, Hana? Maganda ba yung suggestion ko?
Prof, that's really good. So, maganda nga yun, Prof, na parang mas ma-empower yung ating society, yung ating mga communities. It's that's really a good way for us to like engage.
I believe we can do it.
Yes, Prof. Kaya yan, laban yan, Prof. Siguro, I guess, Prof, if we still have, may last two questions pa ako, Prof, if you're still willing to entertain them.
Oh, I can go at this the whole day, Vince.
Okay, thank you very much, Prof. There's something that's been prevalent in our social media, in our news, is the pack silica. I think that's one way a lot of people are hearing about AI right now, for example. Can we ask what's your current stance or thoughts when it comes to the pack silica?
All right. Now, this is a supply chain deal. The thing with supply chain deals or trade deals in general is that the information that is released to the public is always, you have to always take this with a grain of salt. All right. Because that's how big business operates, especially if it's in a multilateral or global things. What I have read, so I don't claim to be an expert in pack silica, I'm just an interested citizen, right? Is that the US and its allies are trying to come up with a global supply chain for key elements of the digital intelligence pipeline that will be safe, secure, which roughly translates to China safe. So that any conflict between mainland China and Taiwan will not impact the supply chain. So part of this would be, of course, rare earth minerals. We use electronics a lot, and if you look at your typical phone, it's not obvious to most people, but it contains a lot of very rare earth minerals. You know, we're talking gallium, cobalt, all of these things. They exist in micro amounts, but the phone will not run at all without that. So they want to make sure that that supply chain is clear. And of course, there are the data centers. Now, one of the main concerns about packed silica is the concern that it will be a data center dump on us. So we have to be very careful if this is in fact the case, because we are an archipelago that makes us an epicenter of climate change. We know this. Uh, we're surrounded by water. Oh my God, just a few inches of sea level rise will make certain coastal towns disappear, right? And here we are, where there are fears, because I'm not saying this is the case, that there will be a multiplication of data centers in our country. So we have to make sure that, the typical environmental impact assessments will be done. We want to make sure that stakeholder consultation forums will be done. You don't just throw eminent domain at everybody, get out because we need this space for our data centers, whatnot. There has to be hearings. People have to speak up. So this, for me, will be a good test of whether our governance systems are in place. But it starts with making sure there's high quality information. For example, I've seen some of the publicity media, they say by opening Pac Silica and the data centers that come with it, we will have thousands of jobs. Some say tens of thousands of jobs. Some say millions of jobs. Okay, let's get these numbers straight. Can we see your forecasts, please? And then can we see what assumptions you made for those forecasts? And then we can have an intelligent conversation, right? You cannot just promise jobs because of data centers. The way they are building data centers now, let's say you have the size of a mega mall, okay, both A and B, as one data center. That thing can be run by 50 people, fully automated, and you have robots running around managing the whole thing. So we use that much resources for this huge thing to create 50 jobs. What's the logic in that? Now, of course, this was very different with the BPOs. When 2000 came around and we had BPOs and call centers, that was different. These were all humans. You hire 100 BPO workers, you now have to open restaurants 24/7, right? You have to have all of these services like gymnasiums, leisure. You literally created so many jobs. That's why so many people entered and became middle class because of the BPO industry. Now, that's something. If we can do something like that, why not? So I'm open to keeping an open mind on Pax Silica, uh, except that, silica is sand, right? Because it's the raw material for chips. I prefer humanitas, Pax Humanita, no? So this has to be for people. This cannot be just because they're mining our sand, they're mining our land, or worse, they're jumping here to build data centers because most of their citizens are already in uproar, right? Because, the Americans are learning to organize. They have not managed to block more than 50 data center buildups through petitions and pickets. We don't do this too well in the Philippines. Well, so this is how capitalism is. If you're building something here and the petitions here are so strong, you go look for another willing country. Why not? You go there. Oh, they're more willing there. I remember when I was a visiting faculty member in Japan, I believe this is in Sophia University. I was interacting with some students there, and then one Japanese sat beside me and said, "Musta ka na pare?" And this is a Japanese student, marunong Tagalog. Sabi ko, "Oh, okay naman ako, ikaw." Ito nga eh. He showed me a list of companies. He kind of, alam mo ba yung mga companies na yan? Nagtatagalog eh. Sabi ko, alam ko to, mga famous Japanese companies. Sabi niya, lahat ng companies na yan, yung mga expansion nila dito sa Japan, hindi ina-approve ng government kasi hindi environmentally compliant. Lahat yan pupunta sa inyo. O sinabi niya sa akin. And I did not even know about this. And I'm the Filipino, right? This shows you how business works. They will make moves. Sometimes the government knows about it, but the citizens do not. So we have to be very, very vigilant. Let's ask questions. Always ask, how will it benefit us? How will it make our the quality of our lives better. Not just how many new jobs. Kasi jobs only matter if they're quality jobs. We're so used to just having any kind of job at all. We're so easy to please. Di ba? Oh, everybody will be a panda delivery. Ano? Okay, I'm not bashing them. My panda delivery guys are my best friends. I chat with them all the time. But I always ask, oh, init-init, paano kulang ka sa protection ah? Ginaganon ko sila. Oo nga, sir, yung kasama ko nga, namatay na sa heat stroke eh. Sabi ko, oh, anong sinasabi nyo? Ha? Even in the advanced countries, the delivery guys are suffering from heat strokes and overwork. They're dying. Even the Koreans, you look it up. Sabi ko, these companies are making so much money because their delivery guys are waking up at 4 a.m. every day and going home at 11 p.m. and they're dying like flies. What protection are they being given? Oh, pero pag sinabi, oh yeah, may paksili ka na, oh, let's count number of jobs. Oh, daming jobs. Oh. Somebody has to check. Teka muna, let's look at job quality. Oh, organized ba yung mga yan? How are they compensated? How do we make sure they will not be overworked? Yan ang parati kong tinitignan when technology is involved. Eh. Kasi nga, like Hannah said, the thing with technology is it makes us believe we're productive, but actually we're chasing productivity all the time. Kasi productive means, ako kasi I am a musician. I play the band, I play chess, I like Aikido. My measure of productivity in my life is I have other things to do than work. I have a band. O kung nawawala na akong time pag mag-band, kasi ako ng AI, ganyan-ganyan. Sabi ko, I'm not really productive. I'm just being a slave to a machine. That's why young people call it the hustle culture, di ba? Parang, you have to appear as busy as possible, naghahabol ka na ganyan. Para yung resume mo maganda, impressive. Pero sabi ko, if you cannot pause and reflect, you're not being productive at all. You're just a puppet to a machine. And we don't need puppets and parrots in this country. Puppets are those who will just do whatever AI says. Parrots are those who will believe whatever AI says and repeat it to others. What we need are critical thinkers. Yung nag-iisip, teka, how does that make my life better? Or how will that make the customer's life better? Ganon. Basic questions. Or in general, how will it make our society better? Marami naman example. You go to Scandinavia, you look at the way the Norwegians, the Dutch, the Finnish, live. You know what quality life means. Hindi yung para tayo mga we work so much for so little while there are more billionaires. Hindi ganon. Dapat we have to, I suppose I'm being nostalgic kasi when I was younger, I would go to the park with my family. My dad would bring me there. We just sit, lay out a picnic, eat. Ngayon, you cannot even enjoy anything unless you go to an air-conditioned mall and spend. Eh, nasa rights ng people yan to have a park where you don't have to spend. You just sit there, tatanga ka lang. Ha? Sarap mga kaya. Diba? Pero tayo, pagka we do something na we're not looking at our phone, parang our day was wasted. Of course not. You looked at the birds. You look at sunset, that's quality life because that's free, beautiful experiences. Not everything has to be in a digi-wall, no? The size of Ngayon, palakihan ng digi-wall, ang gaganda, di ba? Well, I'm so impressed by digi-walls. Eh. Let's go back to the ultimate question. Is the quality of our life improving? And how can these kinds of trade deals help us accelerate the improvement of our quality of life? Close to what maybe mobile phones did in the mid-90s kasi lahat nagka-telepono, di ba? Nag-improve ang quality of life natin. BPOs to an extent, nag-improve naman ang quality life. We know that because so many had income, but let's face it, there was a social cost. Many young people left their homes. They lost touch with traditional values, for good or for bad, We set the global record for the highest rate of HIV infections in the world, which is 20% increase every year. We're the only country with 20% increase in HIV infections every year, which the government does not talk about because, we're a little bit of a repressed country. But that was a social cause. Ang feeling ko, if we did grow the middle class and gave a lot of the millennials income, we should have taken better care of them by also educating them on safe sex behaviors. You're important to us. Be safe. Hindi porke nagkatinginan lang kayo after 2 Smirnoff Mules, you think he's the hottest thing around and No, I'm a sociologist. I really talk about these things because you cannot develop a country if you do not take care of your young workers. They're precious to the economy. They carry the brunt of the economy. Kasi sila yung madali utusan eh. Sa totoo lang, di ba? The boomers and the Xers, yan, utos, 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 utos. Who's doing the brunt of it? Alagaan niyo yung mga yan. You don't just exploit them because they cannot say no, right? The important thing is how do you give them a future? That's what we need. I hope I answered your question, Vince.
Yes, they did actually, Prof. So I think it's very insightful how you shared about Pax Silica and like the different dimensions that go along with the discussion that we should be having when it comes to Pax Silica and AI. I think we've just barely scratched the surface of AI and the important discussions that we should have when it comes to AI, to Gen AI, and everything that goes along with it. So I guess we've went so much already. But I guess my final question, or at least my last request, Prof, is do you have a closing message for all of our listeners with regards to AI and the dangers of AI? Yeah.
Okay, so as usual, being a professor, I will flash a framework. That's how we justify our work. We complicate simple things. Okay, so if you look here, all right. So I go back to this one. All right. So my advocacy is that our goal really is the development of our country. And to develop our country, it's really simple. Does every Filipino have access to what it will take to have a decent life? That's so simple. And I mentioned earlier that the Scandinavian countries and some Commonwealth countries have done this. They have extremely high tax rates, but people have access to everything they need: education, security, health services. So that's what we want because it's in our constitution. And now comes this AI, and everybody say, oh, this is it. This will lead us to the promised land, right? But I believe that can only happen if there is proper governance, regulation, and education so that every AI that our Filipinos have access to are aligned with positive human and social goals and that they are tested to be safe. Right now, and I'm willing to be contradicted on this, the majority of AI that our citizens have access to are not regulated. There is no proper education on its use. They have not been tested for positive social values, meaning they're not aligned, and they are not tested for safety. If so, they would have declared this. But if you look at their model cards, the safety testing is very limited. Now, if we have this, then for human individuals, we can have AI that perhaps can enable us to flourish. So instead of us always rushing or forgetting to have our health examinations done, it will remind us, oh, you haven't been exercising lately, or oh, you haven't been seeing your parents. Maybe time to send an email to say, can we get together, Dad? Things like this so that we are all flourishing. If you're a student, oh, you're not reviewing this part. You're using me too much to give you answers. If I may remind you, you're a student. You should be reading this. And then for organizations, maybe AI can enable organizations to deliver more value to all of the stakeholders of the organization while preserving the environment. Because right now, even though we were saying when countries signed the Rio Declaration that we will be trying to arrest global warming, right? In fact, many companies, including the AI companies, signed that they're committed to reducing greenhouse gas emissions and lowering the global temperature. Guess what? The big tech companies have removed all of those commitments on their website. You don't see them anymore. Why? Because they cannot in conscience claim that they're still supporting arresting global warming when they're pushing for more data centers, because data centers by definition will increase uh, climate temperatures all over the world. These are very hot machines. So the thing is, we want to go back to maybe AI can help us. Can AI help us remind us that, your air conditioning is too much, you don't need that much, or guys, don't use the elevator too much, it's using electricity, that's just 2 floors. Come on, just walk up, make your heart healthier. Maybe. And finally, if we have properly governed AI, I believe combined with everything else, as long as we have education, etc., we can move from the society we are in right now, where the majority are mired in poverty. Even if they save money, one medical emergency can wipe them out. That's not the kind of social security we need. We need stability in our lives. So if we can get a lot of our poor people to the middle class, like so, and then ultimately, this is what our Constitution says: improve quality of life for all. Perhaps if we make all the right moves that I have indicated here, perhaps AI might help. But I'm not putting all of my faith on machines. Ultimately, development depends on human beings caring enough for themselves, caring enough for each other, caring enough for their country to say, we will take ownership of this country, we will develop it because we believe that is the future we deserve. Then we will finally be the country that we have always deserved to be, but we kind of forgot. So now, if we get distracted again because of this new shiny toy, that would be unfortunate. My suggestion is, let's keep focused on the goal. The goal is quality, dignity for all, because that's what the Republic promises. And whatever tools can help us, as long as those tools are safe, well governed, let's go for it. That would be my closing remark, Vin.